Welcome to part 4 and the final part of my Blender video editing tutorial series for beginners. So if you haven't seen the previous parts, then definitely check that out. I'll have a link in the description to the tutorial playlist. So let's get started with this part. So I'm going to start by just dragging in this example video here, and this video is my 2000 subscriber video special. If you want to check out that video, I'll have a link in the description. So in this part, I'm going to start off by showing you how to do color correction to your videos. So there's a few ways that you can color correct your videos in Blender. One way is to just select the video strip and then click here on color, and there's two different settings. So there is a saturation here, and there's also a multiply to make it brighter or darker. However, this is very limited to what you can do, so a better way to do color correction to your video is to just select the video and then click over here on the modifiers, and then you can click on add strip modifier, and there's a bunch of different settings that you can add. So we'll start by just adding the brightness and contrast. So this is now a modifier on this video strip, so you could click on the X here if you wanted to get rid of it, and if you want to hide it from the preview, you could click on the I there. So now you can choose a brightness, so I could make this a bit brighter and also add a bit more contrast. I could also add strip modifier, and the second one here is the color balance. This one is a great one for color correction. So there is the lift, and there also is the gamma and the gain, and I'm actually going to click right up here to hide the brightness and contrast so I can't see it for now. So you can play around with the colors here. You can change the lift and the gamma and the gain, so you can play around with those colors. Then let's also go back up here, click on add strip modifier, and my favorite one is the curves. So I really like using the curves for color correction. So I'm just going to hide this one so we can't see it, and I'm going to scroll down here, and I really like using the curves. So the C here is just for color, so I can click here to add a dot on this little line here, and if I drag it down to this corner, it's going to be darker, or if I drag up here into this corner, it's going to be brighter. And I can also click here to add another dot there, and I could like drag this down to kind of make it more contrasty and sharp. And then if you want to get rid of any of these dots, you can click on the X here, and that'll get rid of it. So I could start by just making it a bit brighter by dragging this up here, and then you have R, G, and B, and these stand for red, green, and blue. So if I wanted more red, again, if you drag it up here, there's going to add more, or if you drag it down this corner, there's going to be less. So I'll drag the R right up here, and now it is a bit more red, or I can make it less red. Also here on G for green, I can add more green if I want to, and then also for blue here, I can drag it up and down. Also, if I scroll right back up here and click on add strip modifier, you also have the hue correct. So the hue correct will add more or less of that value. So let's say I just want to get rid of the green values. If I click on these dots here and drag them down, there's going to be less of the green if I drag this down. So you can see it's getting rid of the green, or if I want there to be more green, I could drag these up, and there will be much more green. If I go back up here and click on add strip modifier, there is also this mask here. Now the mask is used for more complex things. It's used for like some visual effects, or if you're wanting to like blur out a face or do some other things like that in your video editing. So I'm not really going to go over this. This would be something for another video topic. Then we also have this tone map here, so I'll add the tone map, and there's a few different settings like this intensity here, and also the contrast and a few other settings. I really don't use this that much. I really just use the curves for most of my color correction. So I can go back up here, and I can go to the last one, which is just this white balance. So if I go all the way down, I can actually get rid of some of these by hitting the X button. So I'm just going to hit the X button to get rid of some of these. So there is this white balance, and again, I really don't use this that much. I mainly just use the curves, but you can see I can change that there. So I've added some color correction to this strip here, but then if I go over to this strip, you can see the color correction isn't on this strip here. So if I want to copy this exact modifier settings over to this other strip, I'm going to first select this strip, then I'll hold down the shift key, and lastly select the strip which has the modifier. So I'm selecting this first, hold down the shift key, select this last. Then what I can do is click on copy to selected strips. And then you can either choose to replace it or append it. So if you append it, it'll just add it to the video strip, or if you click on replace, it'll get rid of the other modifier and then add it instead. I'm just going to click on append. So now if I click over here on this one, you can see this one has the same curves. So they have the same curves, and now you can see the color correction looks exactly the same. However, the problem with this is that if I click on this one here and then change the color, color, like let's add some red. Now if I go over to this one, you can see it is now different because I've changed the first one. And also you may have a large video editing project with many different things, and you might want to add the same color correction to a large portion of your video editing. So this is where adjustment layers come in. So what I'm going to do is select this strip here, click on the X button to get rid of the curves, and this one here, click on the X button. So instead of adding modifiers to each strip, I can instead press Shift A, and I can add the adjustment layer. So the adjustment layer is this strip here. It's kind of like this dark green. I'll bring it up and I'll click and drag to bring out the handle. So what you can do is you can put the adjustment layer over your other strips, and then you can add modifiers to this. So you can see the adjustment layer actually doesn't look like anything. It's basically just an invisible strip over your editing. So if I move it around, nothing is really changing. However, I can add modifiers to it over here on the modifiers tab, just like if I were adding it to videos. So on the adjustment layer, I'll click on add strip modifier, and then I can add curves, and then I can just do a bit of color correction here. So maybe I'll make it more contrasty. So if I now play through this, it is going to add color correction to all the videos which are underneath the adjustment layer. And what's really useful about this is that I can also press the H key and just hide it, and I can see what my video edit looks like without the color correction, and I can press Alt H to unhide the adjustment layer. I can also move the adjustment layer away if I want to move it out of a specific spot. So this is super useful, and I could even rename this. So if I click up here on strip, I could rename this to color correct. So now you can see the adjustment layer says color correct. So this is a very useful feature, especially if you have a large video editing project. So while we're on the topic of adjusting your videos, let's go over some different strip effects. So I'm just going to bring the color correct out of the way for now, and I'm just going to click on this strip right here. So if you go to the add menu or press Shift A, you can go down here to effect strip, and there's a few different effect strips that we can add. Now you can see there are a bunch of ones up here which are grayed out, and to use these ones you have to select 2 different strips. However, I don't even use these, so I'm not going to go over them. So let's go to this one here, which is the transform. Now in older versions of Blender, this transform strip was very useful because it used to be that you couldn't just press S to scale or R to rotate or G to grab, and so you actually had to use a transform strip. But there's really no need to use this feature anymore in Blender, because in newer versions of Blender, if you just select the video file, you have the transform settings right here. So I'm just going to select this and press X to delete it. So I'm going to select this strip again, I can press Shift A, and the next one is the speed control. So I'll click on speed control, and you can see it's added this speed on top of this video file. Now if I just play this, you can see it's going very, very fast. And why it's doing that is because I cut this strip, and what the speed control is doing on default is it's making the entire video start here and then end right over here. So on default, if you click on the speed and then go over here to the effect settings, you can see the speed control is set to stretch. So that is going to squish the speed down to the speed of this video. So you can see it's going very fast, and it's playing the entire 2-minute video in just a few seconds. If I click on this handle here and press G to grab and make it bigger, now it's going to play from the starting, which is right over here, over to about 15 seconds. However, that's not the only option. So I can click on the speed control, and then I can click here on the stretch, and I can change it to multiply instead. And so what this will do is it'll actually give you a number value to change the speed. So right now 1 is the default, but if I turn it to like 0.5, now it's only going to be half the speed, or I could turn it to like a 2 instead, and now it's going to play at double the speed. So very straightforward, you can just change the speed number here. Now if you click on the speed control, there are also 2 other options, the frame number and the length, but I really don't use these. I find the stretch and the multiply to be the most useful. Alright, so I'm now going to show you how to speed up and slow down video, and I'm also going to show you how to speed up and slow down the audio with the video. And for an example, I'm using this part here in my Rubik's Cube self-reflection short film that I posted a while back, and I'll have a link to that video if you'd like to check it out. So I'll select the video strip, and then I will press Shift A, and I'm going to go down here to effect strip, and then I'll add the speed control. Now on the speed control type here, I want to change this to a multiply instead, and I want the multiply to be 1, so it's going at the same speed. So what I'm going to do is have it get much slower right over here. So I'm going to go over here to the starting, and right when it's kind of smashing through the glass, I'm going to hover my mouse over this value and press the I key. And then to be able to see this better, I do want to use the graph editor. So I'm going to click here in the corner and drag out to split the window. And if I click here to change the editor type, let's change it to the graph editor. And then I can also click and drag to make this smaller, and I'll make this smaller as well. So you can see right here is the speed control. So I'm now going to go over farther to about here, and I want to make it much slower. So here on this speed control, I'm going to change it to like a 0.25, and then with my mouse hovered over this value, I'll press the I key. And you can see here in the graph editor, it is showing us that speed. So now if I play through this, you can see it is getting very, very slow. So then I want it to speed up around here, so I'll just go to about here, and then again I need to add another keyframe, so I'll press the I key with my mouse hovered over that value. Then I'm going to go to a little past frame 300, or you can go as far as you want, and I want to have sped up much more. Maybe I'll go a little bit farther to kind of about there. So now what I can do is take this speed control and I can turn it up. So you could turn it back to 1 if you want to be going at its original speed. I'm going to turn it up to like a 7 so that it is much faster, and then hover my mouse over this value and press the I key. So you can see it'll start out at the normal speed, it'll get slow, and then it will get very fast. So now if I play this, you can see it gets very, very slow right here, and then after that it's going to start to speed up, and now you can see it is very, very fast. So as you can see, it's really quite easy to animate the speed. Now let's say that you want the audio to be animated exactly with the video. So you can click on the audio here, and then you can click here on strip, and then you can open up the time here and make sure you have the audio selected, and you can see there is a speed factor. So you could do the same thing and animate this, so when it gets slower you could animate this down, so you could turn it down to a smaller number, and then if you wanted to speed it up you could make it a larger number. What I'm going to do is actually copy the same keyframe so that it's the exact same speed. And so it is going along with the video. So what I first want to do is click here on the speed control, and then I'm going to click on this button here, and this is going to jump to the keyframe. So I'll continue to press this button until the playhead is here at the first keyframe. Then I'm going to select the audio strip, and right here on the speed factor I want to hover my mouse over the value and press the I key, and that'll add a keyframe to the speed factor of the audio. So I can now click here on the speed control, just select that, and I'll press the A key to select those keyframes, and then I can press Ctrl C to copy those keyframes. Then I can click here on the audio strip, and because we've already added a keyframe there, it'll know what value we want to add the keyframes to. So then hover your mouse over the graph editor and press Ctrl V, and that is going to paste those same keyframes. So I'll now just watch the entire thing and watch how the audio gets slower and faster. And there we go, so that actually worked really quite well. And so that's how you use the speed factor in Blender to change the speed of your videos. So I'm going to now click here in the corner and click and drag over and then let go to close the graph editor. So there's a couple other effect strips which we haven't gone over yet. So if I press Shift A, I can go here to effect strip, I can add this glow here. Now I don't use this glow very often, I just don't find it that useful, but it's kind of going to add like a fake glow, so it'll take the lighter parts and it's going to make it look like it's glowing. So if I turn the threshold down, it kind of looks like these lighter parts are glowing just a little bit, and I can also turn this up a bit, turn up the boost factor, and it kind of is giving a fake glow effect. So if you want to add a fake glow effect, you could do that with this glow here. Let's just select this one, I'll press Shift A, we'll go to effect strip, and finally there is the Gaussian blur. So I'll click on this, and so it's now added it over the video. So I can drag the size X or the size Y to just blur it going up and down or back and forth, but if you want to blur them together, you can click and then you can drag down, and then you can drag all the way over and it's going to blur it. So this is a great way to blur your video if you want to blur that. Now earlier in this video we talked about the adjustment layers and how you can use the adjustment layers to adjust multiple videos. So I've just broken up these videos here so I have multiple videos, and let's say that I want to add an effect strip to all these videos at once. Well, what you can do is press Shift A and you can go here and add an adjustment layer, and then you can select the adjustment layer and you can press Shift A and you can add an effect strip to the adjustment layer. So for instance, I could add the Gaussian blur, and then here on the X size and the Y size I could drag this out and it is going to blur it. So if I now click and drag to box select both of these and drag it around, it's just going to blur it where the adjustment layer is. So this is again very useful if you have multiple video strips and you want to be able to add an effect to all those strips at once. You can just drag this over the strips that you want to add the effect. Alright, so we're getting towards the end of this video editing tutorial series. There's another important thing that I want to show you though, and that is if you're playing through a video file that you've edited and the video file isn't showing up. So you can see as I drag through this, here's the first video and you can see that really well, but then the second video is completely invisible. Now unless you went here to the strip settings and you turn the opacity down, then probably why this is happening is because the Blender file doesn't know where the data is located on your computer. And this can happen if you don't deleted the video file on your computer, or if you moved it to a different location, or you may have moved this video editing file to somewhere else on your computer. So if I just select this video file here and scroll all the way down, I can open up the source here. And if I drag this out to make it bigger, you can see I have this video in my downloads folder. However, it's actually missing the file data, and that's because I have moved it to my videos folder. So to change the source of this video, I can click on this file icon here. And then in Blender's file browser, I'm going to locate to my videos folder, and you can see this is where I've moved it. So I'm just going to navigate here, and then I can click on accept. And now if I play through this, you can see it's found the video file. However, I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo that. So let's say that you have a large video editing file and you have many little cuts, and maybe Blender has lost the data of many of the different videos. Well, if you know where the video is located on your computer, then you can tell Blender to automatically find all the missing data. So what you can do is click here on File, and then you can click here on External Data, and then you can click on Find Missing Files. Then you can just locate to the folder where you have the files, so I know I've moved them here to this folder. You can search for it on your computer if you don't know where it is, and then once I've located to the folder where the video data is, I'll click on Find Missing Files. And so if I play through this, you can see it has now found the video data for all of the different strips. Now another really useful thing to know is how to add data from one video editing file to another video editing file. So I have this video editing file over here, and this is the video with the monkeys, and then I have this video editing file over here, and this is with the toast scene. And I have saved both of these Blender files to my computer. Now right up here in Blender, if you click on this drop down, it's going to show you some scenes. And on default, this is just renamed to scene, but I have called this one monkey, and then this one over here, I have renamed to toast. So Blender has different scenes, and you can add different scenes and then work in multiple video editing projects. So if I want to add this video editing data over to this Blender file, then I can append this scene into the other Blender file, and then I can add it to this video editing. So to do this, I'm going to go to the Blender file that I want to add the other data into, and I'll click on File, and then I can click on Append. And this is going to bring up Blender's file browser, and I can locate to the folder where I have saved the monkey head video editing. So here it is, and I'm going to double click on the Blender file to go into it, and then there is a bunch of folders. And so to add the video editing data, I want to go here into the scene, and then you can see here's the monkey scene, and this is this monkey scene right here. So I'll double click on this to add it in. So now in this file, if I click right up here, you can see there are two different scenes. So I'll click on the monkey scene, and here is the same data. So now I can just make this full screen. So what I can now do is press the A key to select all of the strips. Then I'll press Ctrl C, and that is going to copy those strips. Then I can click here on the drop down to see the scenes, and I'm going to go back to the toast scene. And then I want to go right over here and bring the playhead to the end, and then I can press Ctrl V, and that is going to paste that data into the same file. So I can now bring it up here and I can stick it right here, and so now I can play through this, and we have the monkey scene, and then we also have the toast scene. So that is how you can add video editing data from two different Blender files into one single file, and you can render this together now into a full video. So right here at the end of the video editing tutorial series, I'm going to show you how I've customized Blender to do video editing faster. Because personally, I don't really like the default shortcut keys of Blender's video editor, and I find those shortcut keys kind of hard to use. So I've actually gone into Blender's user preferences and I've changed some of the shortcut keys to work better for my use. Now I'm just talking about this now at the very end of the video because it isn't quite that important and it is a bit more advanced to change the shortcut keys, and probably most of you watching really won't need to change the shortcut keys. So to change the shortcut keys, I'm going to click right up here on Edit, and then I can go to the Preferences. So in Blender's user preferences, I'm first going to click on the key map here, and I have the Select with Mouse button set to right click select. Now why I have this set to right click select is because back when I very first started using Blender, right click was actually the default in Blender. And so I used right click select for many years, and so I built that muscle memory and got used to using right click select. But then in more recent versions of Blender, I believe it was Blender version 2.8, they changed it to left click select on default. And for most people using Blender, left click select does make sense because most other programs use left click to select. So it really doesn't matter, you can just use whichever one you want, but there are a few things that are different with right click select. So with right click select, instead of dragging up here where the time is, I can just drag anywhere by left clicking. So I can just left click and drag around and it'll move the playhead. Whereas on left click select, if I try to drag this, you can see it's going to add this box select. So with the left click, I have to click and drag right up here to move the playhead. Now because I use right click select, I right click to select the different strips. Whereas if I change this back to left click really quick, normally left click is used to select things, and that really does make sense and is most intuitive for most people. So probably most people will just leave it left click. And then I can also right click and drag if I want to do the box select. Now, if I'm using left click select, I can right click and that is going to bring up the sequencer context menu. But if I'm using right click select, that is instead used to select the strips. So if I want to access anything on the context menus, I can instead just click here and there's going to be all the different settings. So all of these settings here can either be found in these menus right here, or they can be found in the different settings. So I'm going to bring back the user preferences here onto the screen. Now, as well as that, I've also turned off the select all toggles. Now, the select all toggles is going to make it so that you have to double tap the A key to deselect everything. And this was a feature, I believe it was added in Blender 2.8, but I just really don't like it. I like just being able to press the A key once to switch between selecting and deselecting. So if the select all toggles is turned off, it's turned off on default. I can press the A key to select everything, but then if I want to deselect, I have to double tap the A key. And I personally really just don't like that. So here on the user preferences, I've turned on the select all toggles, and now every time I press the A key, that is going to switch between selecting everything and deselecting everything. And I just find it much more intuitive. And again, it's what I got used to back when I started using Blender. That was the default. Now, as well as that, I've also changed a few shortcut keys. So what I can do is click here on the arrow to close the preferences, and I'm also going to make the user preferences a bit bigger. Now, why I've changed Blender's video editing shortcut keys is because when I'm video editing, I have my right hand on the mouse, and then I have my left hand on the left side of the keyboard. And on the left side of my keyboard, I have like the tab key, the caps lock, and the shift, and I have the control key and the alt key, and also the Z key, the A key, and the X key, and those are all very common shortcuts. But let's say I'm cutting a strip, I don't want to have to move my hand halfway across the keyboard and then hit the K button or the H button or some of those other shortcuts. So I just really don't like that, so I've changed Blender's shortcut keys so that they are on the left side of my keyboard. So again, you totally don't have to change this if you don't want to. So I do a lot of video editing, and so I want to speed up the process. So again, in Blender's user preferences, if you go to the key map, you can click here on name, and then you can go right over here to the search. And I'm going to start by searching for split strips. So the split strips is how you cut the different strips. So now it's going to show you a few different things, but we want to go down here to sequencer, and here's the split strips. And so this bottom one here, this one is the hard cut, and then this one here, this one is the soft cut. So if I just click on this arrow here, that is going to reset it to the default, and you can see the default is K. So I instead use the S key because my hand is already right next to the S key on my keyboard. So what I do is click right here, and then I hit the S key, and then you can see now it's set to the S key, so the S key will now work to cut the strips. And then I actually don't use the hard cut very much, so I just leave it set to Shift K. Now I also don't like having to use the H key to lock the strip. So if I just start to search for lock strips, you can see there's the lock strips and the unlock strips. And if I click on these arrows here, that'll bring it back to the default. So Control H is kind of hard to press, and Control Alt H is hard as well. So what I do is click here on the lock strips, and then I press R, then I click here on the unlock strips, and I just press Control R. And then also here on the search here, I'm going to search for slip, and this is the slip strips. So this is going to move the data within the strips. Now on default, if I click on the X here, you can see it is set to S, but I wouldn't want to change it to S because now I've already changed S to be the shortcut key to cut the strips. So I need to change this to a different shortcut. So what I'm going to do here is click on S, and then I've chosen Alt S. And then there is one more setting that I have changed. So if I click over here on System, then you can go down here to the video sequencer. And on the video sequencer, you can see there is a memory cache limit. And so this is how much of Blender's computer memory it's allowed to use. And this number here, this is not in gigabytes, this is in megabytes. Now I believe on default, Blender is only allowed to use 4 gigabytes in the video sequencer. However, I built my own computer and it's a pretty powerful computer. And so I actually have 32 gigabytes of RAM in my computer. So I have turned this number way up on the memory cache limit. So 20,480 megabytes in gigabytes is 20. So I am allowing Blender to use 20 gigabytes of memory. So if your computer has a lot of RAM or a lot of memory, then you can turn this up if you want to, but you really don't have to. You can just leave this at the default and video editing will work just fine. And then also here on the proxy setup, we talked about this earlier, but I have it set to manual just because I prefer that. So then once you've set up all the settings in Blender's user preferences, you can click on the Save Preferences button. Or if the autosave preferences is already turned on, then it'll automatically save the preferences. So by saving the preferences, every time you open up a new Blender file, these preferences will be on the default. Alright, so with that all covered, this is going to wrap up my complete Blender video editing tutorial series for beginners. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial series, and I hope you found it helpful. And if you'd like to help support me and this channel to help me keep on creating Blender tutorials and Blender content, then some great ways to do that are by checking out my Gumroad store and my Patreon page and the YouTube memberships. And I'll have all the links in the description to where you can support the channel. But I hope you found this tutorial series helpful, and thank you for watching.